Hi, it's me again, Dutch Jackson, author of Chronicles of Dawn, Weapon of God. A friend of mine and I have been working on trying to put together an audiobook. So here's a snippet from chapter 1 of my book, and the chapter is entitled Dusty Destination. Hope you enjoy.
The following is a production of the Chone Media Group.
Chronicles of Dawn, Book 1, by Dutch Jackson. Narrated by Chris Collier. Foreword by Tom Proctor. Copyright 2008. For Debbie, my queen, my wife, my love. Chapter 1, Dusty Destination. Present day. Dust swirled and billowed a trail behind the old Harley as it thundered down the dirt road. Sunlight beat down on a weary biker, left over from a scorching afternoon. In a few hours, it would be dark, and then it would be even harder to see. The rider pushed on, keeping the 48 pan head from slipping on the loose substrate. Her grip tightened now and then, making certain that the front tire did not lose traction. Out of the corner of her eye, she detected movement and laid on the brakes just enough to keep the bike from lying down, but not from sliding about 15 feet. A small jackrabbit darted across the road, stopping just long enough to look at its savior. "You're welcome," she said through a blue paisley kerchief that covered her nose and mouth. She took this as an opportunity to wipe the dust from her goggles and checked her map again. Once she was certain of her location, the map was stuffed back into a saddlebag. The shifter was tapped down to first gear, and she lurched forward once more. In the distance, she saw her destination, a desolate bar tucked away in the outskirts of the Yakima Desert. Not run down, but on the other side of the coin, it had probably been quite some time since it was a quote-unquote hot spot. The sign, barely legible, still read, Bill Z's Pub. Next to the name, a cleverly costumed cartoon devil in a bartender's garb held a pitchfork and smiled. She coasted to a smooth stop in front of the pub and in one fluid motion flipped out the kickstand with her left boot while the spur on the back still made a little metal jingle as this was done. Thinking back, she grinned as the memories of the other spur, the one that was missing, trickled forward from her past. She shook her head quickly, as if to get her thoughts back in order. "Keep your head straight, girl," she hissed at herself. After a quick dismount, she slapped her coat and chaps, trying to knock off 3 days of desert dust. When she removed her helmet, wavy raven-colored hair fell between her shoulder blades. Soon after hanging the helmet off her handlebars, she removed the goggles to reveal one beautiful brown left eye and the leather patch covering the right. With one simple tug down on the blue paisley kerchief, her full red lips surrounded by olive-colored skin were uncovered. Reaching into a saddlebag, she pulled out a Stetson that had seen better days and placed it on her head, checking to make certain that it was straight. Going over her mental checklist, she turned and faced the pub. The sign over the door read, "Abandon all gripes and complaints, ye who enter here." A leather-clad hand pulled the door open with a creak, and she stepped in. A swirl of dust pirouetted through the air from the tail of her duster as she entered the room. The shift from light to dark was brief, but somewhat disorienting as her vision adjusted. She breathed in the stale, smoke-filled room deeply. The pungent aroma was not what caused her to choke a bit. "Damn, it's the entire room," she muttered to herself. To the people of Bill Z's Pub, the female stranger that just breezed in did not appear to be too much of a threat. She stood roughly 5'2" and was dressed as if she had just walked out of one of Clint Eastwood's spaghetti westerns. She stepped with one rusty spur jingling on her left foot, and her right eye was covered with an eye patch, making them silently guess if she was called Lucky. Her eye, now fully adjusted, slowly scanned the room from left to right. She heard the jukebox playing Dead Horses softly in the background. From her position, directly at her 9 o'clock, sat 2 men in construction attire playing cards. They appeared fully prepared for work, with the exception that their clothes were spotless. This would be normal if it was not the end of the workday, and they looked to be on their 4th or 5th shot of Jack. The card dealer was tall and skinny, wearing orange coveralls with a yellow hard hat. His card-playing companion was a much larger fellow with a thick beard and an orange safety vest. At least the bigger of the two was smart enough to take the hard hat off indoors. To her right, a seemingly young bartender poured a beer and slid it to the large red-headed patron sitting across from him. The man took the beer, drank deeply, and began spilling some on his shirt. "Damn it, fucking shit," the big red-headed man exclaimed. With beer completely soaking his flannel work shirt, he dismounted the bar stool and headed to the men's room to clean himself up, cursing loudly to himself the entire way. "Every fucking time, like I got a goddamn hole in my lip or something." The bartender laughed to himself while wiping the bar down and cleaning up Big Red's mess. He stopped drying up the spilled beer for a second while she sat down next to Big Red's seat. At the very back of the pub sat a male figure cloaked in darkness. She could not make out his face, but he seemed to be fixed on her with cold, uncaring eyes that felt like they were staring into her soul. Shrugging off his glare, she planted herself at the bar. "Good evening. What's your poison, dear?" the bartender said with a greasy smile. The name tag on his shirt read Bill. "Whiskey. Neat," she said coldly. "Yes, ma'am," the bartender replied, a little less confident. He poured a tumbler glass with Jameson and set it softly in front of the stern female stranger. Her one eye closed as she took a nice slow sip and placed the glass back down on the bar. "They don't make whiskey like they used to," she said. The bartender looked confused towards the stranger, knowing that he hadn't carded her. She still seemed to be in her early 20s. How could she know what they used to make it like? "Well, nothing is like it used to be. Things change all the time," he said, just to cover the awkward silence. His feet shifted silently, and he moved more centered in front of the stranger, summoning up the courage. He asked, "So, dear, what brings you to our dusty neck of the woods?" "Looking for an old acquaintance," she replied, taking another pull from the whiskey to help the lie go down better. When she put the glass down, she noticed the bartender staring at her eye patch. He quickly changed his gaze downward to the glass that should have disappeared by then, with all the polishing he had been doing to it. Her finger traced the side of the tumbler's glass from top to bottom, landing in a spilled drop of whiskey on the bar. She tapped at it, then began drawing something on the bar with the droplet of whiskey. Looking up from her wet artwork, she gazed calmly at the bartender. "Wondering what happened to my eye, Bill?" Her tone was calm and set the bartender at ease. He looked at her with some shame as if he had been caught stealing. "Yes, ma'am, I was," he admitted. She tapped her glass, and he topped it off. "Well, that's a long story. You sure you got the time? This place is busy, you know." Her sarcasm made the bartender smile. "I know it gets crazy around happy hour," he laughed loudly. "Tell you what. You keep the whiskey pouring, and I'll tell you a story you'll never believe." She slid the tumbler glass towards him. He whispered to her while pouring, "Little lady, you got a deal."